My name is Emma and I'm 28. My family uninvited me from Christmas at the $8,000 chalet I paid for. So I canceled it and watched their perfect holiday dreams collapse. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. My family's connection with me has always been complex. From the outside, we appear to be the picture-perfect suburban family. Dad, with his tidy business attire and know-it-all attitude. Mom, who insists on keeping the peace, yet always appears to support him. My younger sister, Vanessa, the golden child, could set the house on fire and still be described as spirited rather than reckless. Then there's me, the one who always worked hard, tried to keep my head down, yet still got treated like an outsider. For as far as I can remember, Christmas has served as their platform. Each year followed the same pattern. Vanessa received the spotlight. Dad delivered platitudes about family values, and Mom preoccupied herself with making everything appear ideal while ignoring the less-than-perfect comments hurled my way. I learned to deal with the passive-aggressive jabs, comparisons, and tiny reminders that I wasn't quite one of them as Vanessa was. However, over the last year, I began to suspect that something had changed. I had a solid job and a steady paycheck. And for once, I wanted to contribute to the holiday, to make it feel like I wasn't simply a bystander in their world. That's how the chalet arrived. I found this lovely cabin-style chalet in the Highlands. Snow all around, a wood-burning fireplace, and large windows facing out into the slopes. It was the type of vacation destination that people put on postcards. I spent weeks looking for the appropriate spot, calculating my budget, and finally booking the entire place. $8,000 went quickly, but it was worthwhile, because I hoped this year would be different. Maybe they'd realize how much I cared and wanted to be a bigger part of the family Christmas ritual. I also texted Dad the hotel confirmation so he could boast to his buddies. He didn't thank me. He just remarked, "Good, that's the least you could do." At the time, I dismissed it. That was just Dad, never giving me credit and never saying no. However, when December approached, the Pfizers reappeared. Vanessa kept saying it was her chalet trip, as if I had planned it for her. She even mentioned it on social media, stating, "Can't wait for our family Christmas at the chalet Dad rented." That stung. I was not even mentioned. When I questioned her about why she phrased it that way, she simply smiled and said, "Relax, Emma. No one cares who booked it. It's all Dad's idea anyway." That should have been my first major clue. I still wanted to believe. I hoped that once we arrived, they might surprise me with some gratitude. Instead, everything came to a head on a typical Wednesday night in early December. I had swung by my folks' place after work to drop off some boxes of decorations I had bought. They were sitting in the living room, sipping wine as usual, and Vanessa was sprawled on the couch discussing what outfits she would bring. I was about to add how I had stocked up on supplies for the chalet, I began, when Dad interrupted. "You're not invited to Christmas this year," he yelled, as if he were instructing me to take out the trash. I froze, the words barely registering at first. "What?" I said, wondering whether I had misheard. "You heard me," he replied bluntly, swirling his wineglass. "It's going to be a family-only Christmas. We don't need complications. You can do your own thing." I recall giggling under my breath, more out of surprise than amusement. "Is it just the family? I am literally your daughter." Vanessa sneered at me from the sofa. "Dad just means it's going to be less stressful without you. Don't make a scene, Emma." And Mom, sweet, always neutral Mom, just gave me a pitying look as if I were a stranger looking for a place to stay. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. We want peace this year." I can't put into words how I felt at the time. Yes, it hurt. Betrayal, of course. But largely, it was this cold clarity, like if a curtain had fallen and I could finally see them for who they truly were. For years, I had been pursuing bits of validation, attempting to fit in. And in one remark, Dad made it clear that I never did. I did not argue. I did not beg. I just nodded, laid the box of decorations down on the floor, and said, "Fine." They undoubtedly assumed I was upset, that I'd go home and cry about being excluded, but in reality, my thoughts were already moving. I remembered the chalet reservation that was in my inbox, the one booked in my name, using my card and money. And as I walked out of their house that night with their smug expressions behind me, I realized something. They thought they had Christmas wrapped up, that they could obliterate me as if I were nothing. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I got down at my laptop, opened up the bank transfers, and secretly transferred the holiday monies I had sent to Dad back into my account. $8,000 fell back into its proper location. Then I opened the chalet reservation and, with a simple click, canceled it entirely. No penalty. It was still early enough. The best aspect was that the booking was in Dad's name on paper since I wanted him to feel involved, but the payments were mine. So when the cancellation went through, the credit was returned to me. I didn't tell them, of course. I went to bed with a peculiar calm, partly expecting a fallout. The next morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I had 31 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and one message that stopped me in my tracks. And that's when things really started to disintegrate. My father sent the message, which was short and to the point, as if he still had control of the situation. Call me back now. I didn't. I sat there with my coffee, reading through his prior voicemails, each of which was angrier than the last. First, there was confusion. Emma, there's a mistake. The chalet reservation isn't showing up on my account. Call them and fix it. The tone switched to annoyance. This isn't funny. If you're pulling some stunt, you better undo it immediately. Finally, the inevitable wrath. You think this makes you clever? You've embarrassed me, Emma. Do you understand that? Fix this now. He was shamed. That was what mattered most. Not the fact that his daughter was reportedly not invited to Christmas. Not the sheer audacity of dumping me after I'd paid for everything. No, the main sin here was that his friends and extended family would soon learn that the big chalet trip was not going to happen. His pride had been harmed, and in his society, it was unforgivable. Vanessa began contacting me about midday. Her tone was harsher than Dad's, less furious and more entitled. Are you seriously doing this to us? You promised we'd have Christmas at the chalet. All my friends know about it, Emma. I already told everyone. Do you even care what this does to me? I could almost hear her whimpering voice through the text. I didn't respond. Silence was more powerful than any words I could have typed back. That nightfall, however, the real games began. Mom arrived at my place unexpectedly, bearing a casserole, as she often did when she wanted to soften terrible news. She let herself in using the spare key I hadn't realized she still possessed. Emma, she murmured, with a studied, charming tone, I believe we got off to a bad start last night. You are aware of your father's harsh language at times. He didn't say you weren't welcome. It was simply tension talking. I stared at her, really curious. So now I'm invited? Her smile faded, but she continued, Certainly, but only if you resolve the chalet issue. Your father's reputation is at stake, and many are looking forward to this trip. It would mean so much to everyone if you just handled it quietly. The manipulation was so obvious that I almost laughed. It was not about me being included. It was about me cleaning up their messes. I inquired, and if I don't? She placed the casserole on my counter, folded her hands together as if praying, and groaned. Then I'm afraid you'll be making things very difficult for this family. Do you really want to ruin Christmas for your sister? It was back there again. Vanessa prioritizes her happiness above all else. I remembered birthdays when Mom received extravagant gifts while I received utilitarian items like socks or notebooks. I remembered when Vanessa crashed my car, and my parents advised me not to be selfish because Vanessa had been through enough stress. The same trend was repeating. My sacrifice, her spotlight. I did not give Mom the reaction she expected. I just remarked, Thanks for the casserole, and accompanied her to the door. She stared at me with a sad little expression, as if I were the problem child throwing a tantrum, and said, Your father is very disappointed in you. That night, Vanessa connected me to a new group chat she had formed. The name of it was Christmas at the Chalet Snowflake Christmas Tree. The irony almost killed me. She must not have understood I had canceled everything because her messages were full of gushing about ski suits, champagne, and Instagram photographs she'd take by the fireplace. Dad said, I'll handle the wine. Don't worry. Mom responded with emojis. It was as if they were attempting to make me disappear despite the fact that I was the one who had made it possible. Finally, Vanessa tagged me. Emma, could you please send the updated booking confirmation? Dad wants to ensure that the dinner reservations are set up. I glanced at the message for a long time, unsure what to do. Every instinct pushed me to tell the truth right then in the chat, to expose them as the greedy, entitled family they'd always been. But something inside me said it wasn't time. Not yet. Allow them to spin their dreams a little longer. Let them believe that everything was under control. The longer they dangled on the hook, the more satisfying it would be when reality finally snapped tight. The anxiety only increased from there. Over the next week, they began throwing signals to extended family members, boasting about the chalet trip and implying that Vanessa was somehow hosting it. One of my aunts even contacted me, perplexed. "Your sister told me you're not coming this year. That can't be right, can it?" When I gently told her that Dad had uninvited me, she gasped and exclaimed, "But you're the one who paid." Word spread. I could sense their immaculate little facade breaking around the edges, and with each crack, their texts became more frenzied and desperate. But nothing prepared me for the night Dad personally arrived at my apartment door. Not with rage this time, but with something far worse: false charm. He stood there in his pressed coat holding a bottle of wine, as if we were longtime friends. "Emma, daughter," he spoke smoothly, "we need to talk about this chalet situation. I know you're upset, but let's be adults. We can work something out." That's when I knew they weren't simply panicked. They were scheming. Dad did not go inside right away. He stayed at the doorway like a salesman who refuses to leave until you sign on the dotted line. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm one. It was the tight, calculating style I had seen him use in business meetings when I was younger, the script that said he was already planning 10 steps ahead, and I was just another pawn. "Can I come in?" he inquired finally. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened the door wider to let him enter. He placed the bottle of wine on my counter without asking, as if he owned the place. We sat across from one another, the stillness lengthening. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "Listen, about what I said the other night. Uninvited. That was harsh. I was frustrated. You know how things get." I did not respond. I just let him continue talking. He shifted in his seat. "Your sister's been under a lot of stress lately. Her job's shaky. She's worried about money and this chalet trip. Well, it's important for her. She wants to impress her friends, keep her reputation intact. You understand, don't you?" There it was, the speech I had been expecting. Vanessa's sentiments were once again the number one priority. My role was to fix her life, to ensure she always looked wonderful while I remained unseen. Dad cleared his throat and leaned back. "So, here's what we'll do. You'll rebook the chalet, use your card again, I know you can afford it, and put it under my name so I can manage things properly. In exchange, we will discuss increasing your involvement in family decisions in the future as you express a desire to participate." More involved, as if I hadn't been attempting to be a part of things all along, as if belonging to my own family was some sort of reward he could dangle in front of me. If only I paid the price. I held my voice steady. "So, let me get this straight. You want me to rebook an $8,000 trip after you told me I wasn't invited, just so Vanessa doesn't get embarrassed?" His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. "It's not about embarrassment. It's about family unity. You wouldn't want to be responsible for ruining Christmas, would you?" I nearly laughed. Family unity. The phrase seemed absurd coming from him, but I kept quiet, allowing the silence to grow heavier. Dad despised silence. He was continually rushing to fill it. And sure enough, he began talking again. But this time his tone was harsher. "If you refuse, Emma, you are sending a clear message to your mother, sister, and everyone else that you do not care about them. And if that's the path you want to go," he hesitated, eyes narrowing, "then don't expect us to be there for you when you need us." That was the betrayal, not the words. I had known deep down for years that they would never truly be there for me. It was the coldness behind them, the transactional manner he presented it. For him, family was not about love or fidelity. It was leverage. I swallowed hard and kept my emotions in check. "So, you're threatening to cut me off unless I pay for everything again." Dad leaned back and crossed his arms. "Not a threat, just reality. You're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing's free." That word shattered something in me. I recalled all the times I'd gone out of my way to aid them. The loans I provided after Dad's investments failed. I spent my weekends mending stuff around their house. Vanessa was lauded for doing the bare minimum, and I had shown unending patience. And here he was, staring me full in the eyes, insisting that none of it mattered unless I opened my wallet again. I'm not sure if he saw the change in my expression, but for the first time that night, I believe he recognized I wasn't going to cave. His phony charm crumbled slightly, and he whispered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Emma." But the treachery wasn't over. 2 days later, I received a call from my bank. "This is a flagged transaction. Someone tried to exploit your account information to make a huge purchase, a reservation deposit for a chalet, and the name on the attempted booking was your father's." That was when the final thread of confidence snapped. My initial emotion was not even anger. It was a strange, hollow feeling, as if the floor had gone out from beneath me. I anticipated Dad would try to manipulate me, but I didn't expect him to attempt fraud with my personal information. The bank representative politely explained that the transaction was reported because the billing name did not match the account holder. Otherwise, it could have gone through. I thanked them, hung up, and sat staring at my phone, stunned. My own father had attempted to steal from me. There was no longer even a slender thread of familial loyalty binding us together. For him, this was about survival. If he couldn't dominate me with words, he'd use money. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed, rehashing everything. Vanessa posted about her chalet. Mom arrived with her casserole and guilt trips. Dad's arrogant expression at my apartment. And now this. The betrayal was complex and weighty. For the first time in my life, I discovered something that horrified and liberated me. I did not have a family. Not really. The youngster who had always sought their praise had bent herself to fit their pattern. That girl was gone. What remained was quieter, crisper, and more intentional. I was not going to struggle for their affection anymore. I was going to make sure they knew how it felt to lose what they believed they controlled. And so, in the solitude of my vacant flat, I started to plot. Something inside me came into focus after receiving that letter. It seemed like I'd spent my entire life hoping for a nod of approval that would never come. I immediately realized I didn't need it anymore. Instead of crushing me, their words, "You are not needed in this family," provided an unusual sense of liberation. If I was not needed, I owed them nothing. And if I owed them nothing, I could finally begin life on my own terms. The first step was to cut off the lifelines that had been quietly draining me. For years, I'd been assisting in ways I never realized. When Vanessa overdrew her account, I'd surreptitiously transferred her money. When Dad's investments plummeted, I'd cover a few bills. I often chipped in for minor expenses like food, gas, and utilities. It was a habit created out of remorse and a desire to establish my belonging. But not anymore. I shut everything down. I changed my internet banking passwords, deactivated Mom's emergency credit card, and even diverted my mail to prevent snooping. It was like turning off a series of leaking faucets that had been running for years. Then I turned inward at work. Instead of dragging my feet, I began arriving early, putting in effort, and volunteering for projects I used to avoid. I believe part of me needed to immerse myself in something useful, but another part of me realized that every hour I spent on myself was one step closer to being free of their shadow. My supervisor noticed within a few weeks. By the new year, I was sitting in a meeting and hearing the words, promotion and salary increase. For the first time, I had a sense of momentum. My bank account grew. I didn't spend my evenings going through their seductive texts. I removed them all. Instead, I started going to the gym after work, which I had put off for years. The weights, the perspiration, and the slow but steady progress, it all became a ritual. My body grew stronger, and my confidence improved. I wasn't the same person who had sat on the floor clutching that letter anymore. The transformation spread to other aspects of my life. I reconnected with old friends I had separated myself from because my family did not like them. Julian, a college buddy, had his own small marketing agency and invited me to help with some freelancing work. What began as a side project suddenly grew into a significant source of revenue. Julian even quipped, "Emma, you've been hiding your skills for too long. If your family doesn't appreciate you, don't worry. Other people will." Those words remained. For so long, I had judged my worth according to their norms. But outside of their bubble, I was regarded, respected, and even admired. And this is where the actual power shift started. Remember all the paperwork I had secretly gathered? The chalet receipts, Vanessa's posts, the bank fraud notice, and Dad's voicemail? I started fitting them together like puzzle pieces, not out of spite at first, but to assure myself that I wasn't crazy. The evidence was plainly there. They had attempted to delete, distort, and steal from me, and I had proof. The longer I looked at it, the clearer it got. If I desired retribution, it wouldn't be through ranting or emotional outbursts. It would require precision, patience, and allowing them to dig their own hole. Meanwhile, life outside their orbit only became brighter. Julian connected me to contacts who opened possibilities I had never imagined. New contracts, larger clientele, more money than I'd ever made before. I moved into a larger apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Every night, I stood there, glass of wine in hand, gazing at the glittering lights on the horizon and thinking, this is mine, not theirs. Mine. It was not about money or status. It was about finally creating something they couldn't touch, claim credit for, or take away. And each step forward stoked my fire, now one of determination rather than desperation. They were still sending messages. Of course, Vanessa attempted the guilt trip. You're wrecking everything. Why are you doing this to us? Dad issued veiled threats about destroying bridges. Mom played the martyr, writing things like, I lie awake at night worried about you. But those words, which used to wound me, now only scratched the surface. I did not even respond. Silence became my most effective weapon because deep inside I knew something they did not. They had already released their grip on me. They would soon lose much more than that. But I wasn't about to rush it. I was going to let time and success do the work, allowing them to become comfortable in their illusions. Because when the time came to strike back, it would not only be satisfying, but indisputable. Then one afternoon, I discovered something that altered everything, something that transformed all my quiet planning into an obvious, direct path to vengeance. The opportunity arose on an ordinary Tuesday, the type of day where nothing stands out until something changes beneath the surface. I was in Julian's office, helping him prepare a presentation for a new client. While he took a call, I glanced through my inbox and saw a message from my aunt, the same one who had contacted me, puzzled about the chalet weeks before. She differed from the rest of the family. Not flawless, but less cruel and more attentive. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." A PDF was attached containing a scanned copy of an email chain between my father and other extended family. My heart raced as I read. Dad had indicated that Vanessa would be covering Christmas expenses this year. She stood up as the responsible one, and I had decided I could not contribute. He was humiliated. Therefore, we shouldn't bring it up in front of her. My stomach twisted. Responsible one? Vanessa had not even contributed a penny. Dad was reworking the story to make me look like a failure. Worse, he was instilling the notion that I couldn't afford things, that I was somehow beneath them. But as nauseating as it was, the email was invaluable. It confirmed what I had believed all along. Their game wasn't simply about cutting me out. It was about eliminating me and rewriting the family story so that I was portrayed as weak, selfish, and disposable. And then it occurred to me, if they wanted to play with stories, I'd make sure the truth was loud, clear, and impossible to twist. The timing was perfect. My promotion had just been completed, tripling my pay. Julian's freelance contracts were booming. My savings account looked better than it ever had. For the first time, I was not simply surviving. I was in a position of strength, financially secure, professionally respected, socially connected, all aspects of my life they couldn't touch. That night, I began sketching what I dubbed the reveal. Step 1, document everything. I created a folder on my laptop with clearly labeled files, images of Vanessa's social media posts gloating about her chalet, bank bills indicating the money came from me, the cancellation receipt, the fraud warning, and now Dad's email chain. Every lie they had told left a paper trail, and I had it. Step 2, allies. My aunt was already halfway there when she sent me the email. I initially approached her tentatively, just to test the waters over coffee. She acknowledged that she had always felt my parents favored Vanessa unfairly, but had no idea how far it went. She told me that my father's pride was his vulnerability, and Vanessa believed anything made her appear nice. Her words remained like pins on a map, weaknesses, trends, and areas to strike. Step 3, position myself where they wouldn't expect it. Instead of isolating myself, I resumed attending extended family gatherings, birthdays, informal meals, anything other than my parents' house. At first, there were whispers, side glances, and awkwardness from those unsure which version of the story to trust. But I remained calm, polite, and present. I did not defend myself. I did not bring up the chalet. I simply let them see me. Stable job, new apartment, healthier, happier. Slowly, uncertainty began to sneak in. People recognized that Vanessa's boasting did not reflect the reality they saw in me, and all the while, I was building. Julian referred me to someone who worked in event planning, and through this connection, I received the idea for the final part of my plan. If my parents intended to use family gatherings as a stage, I would make sure the brightest spotlight was shining squarely on them when the time came. Because power isn't always about having the loudest voice or the strongest grasp. Sometimes it takes patience, silently stepping out of the shadows, stacking the evidence, aligning the pieces, and waiting until your opponents are so confident they've won that they don't notice the earth crumbling beneath them. By the time Christmas arrived, my parents believed they had succeeded. They spent the holidays sulking at home. No chalet, no trip. Yet, they said it was my fault, that I had ruined everything. Vanessa made a show of sharing photos with friends at a ski resort she'd renamed for clout, claiming it was the Chalet. To the outside world, they appeared unconcerned. But I knew the truth, and I knew what was coming. The next step wasn't only about defending myself. It was about turning the tables, proving to everyone that the daughter they had discarded, erased, and attempted to steal from was not weak. I was the one holding the cards, and the potential to flip the board was closer than they thought. The setting for my vengeance appeared almost too neatly. My aunt called in late January to tell me there would be a large family gathering to celebrate my grandparents' anniversary. There were more than just cousins and uncles. This time, everyone knew me since I was a child, including aunts, uncles, family friends, and some of Dad's business partners. In other words, the exact audience my parents had always enjoyed performing for. The moment I hung up, I knew it was time for the reveal. I spent the next week cleaning the evidence folder I had prepared. Every receipt, screenshot, and voicemail was carefully organized into a presentation file I could open on my laptop and project onto a screen as needed. But the beauty of my approach was that I didn't have to yell or accuse. I merely had to present the truth quietly and deliberately, allowing their own words to do the damage. The night of the anniversary, I entered the dinner hall wearing the suit I had purchased with my promotion bonus, crisp and tailored, with a modest message of confidence. I wasn't the helpless black sheep they had portrayed me as. I shook hands, smiled, and received compliments on how well I looked. My parents quickly spotted me. Dad stiffened. Mom's polite smile wavered, and Vanessa rolled her eyes as if I had interrupted her event. I could sense their dissatisfaction simmering, which only drove me further. Dinner was served, wine poured, and speeches delivered. Then followed informal discussions around the tables. I waited until Vanessa brought up the chalet because she couldn't resist. She laughed loudly, telling a cousin, "It was such a disaster because Emma bailed at the last minute. Honestly, Dad and I had to scramble to make Christmas decent, but some people just can't handle responsibility." Her words were bait, and I took it. I laid down my drink calmly and replied, "That's interesting, Vanessa, because from where I sit, it looked a little different." The table fell silent. Dad quickly interjected, voice calm but strained. "Let's not air family drama here. Tonight's about your grandparents." It made me laugh. I agree. It's about family, which is why it might be nice for everyone to know the full story since you've already started it, Vanessa. I removed my laptop from my bag. I hadn't intended to make it theatrical, but sometimes the circumstance demands it. I asked my cousin to assist me in switching inputs on a projector that had been set up for a slideshow of old images. Within seconds, my screen illuminated the wall, and I showed them. First, the Chalet confirmation email with my name and money clearly displayed. Gasps echoed around the room. Then, the cancellation notification with the reimbursement information returned to me. Vanessa's posts bragging about her chalet were followed by Dad's email chain alleging Vanessa had paid for everything. Finally, the bank issued a flagged fraud alert with his name on it. I did not raise my voice once. I did not accuse or dramatize. I simply stated, "This is what happened. I paid for the chalet, they told me I wasn't invited, and when I canceled it, they attempted to use my account information without my permission." The silence that followed was oppressive. Forks clinked against plates. My parents' faces were pale and frozen. Vanessa tried to argue, claiming I was distorting things, but the proof was right there, incontrovertible. Then came the murmurs. My aunt shook her head as my uncle mumbled, "I knew something was off." Even one of Dad's business acquaintances leaned back and whispered, "Unbelievable. For once, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the one being wronged." Everyone in the room knew I was telling the truth. Dad attempted to salvage it. He rose, glass in hand, and said, "Let's not overreact. It was a misunderstanding." But I stopped him. Remaining calm, I said, A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite someone. This was deliberate, and I think everyone here deserves to know what family values mean to you. The word values hovered in the air like a blade. Mom eventually broke down, whispering, "Emma, please stop." But it was too late. The damage was done. Their carefully designed facade had shattered in front of the very individuals they wished to impress. I didn't stay very long after that. I didn't need to. As I left the dining hall, I could still hear the comments and inquiries directed at them. For the first time in my life, the weight was lifted off me. It was on them. And the joy of walking out into the chilly night air with my head held high was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The fallout was immediate. My phone buzzed constantly the morning after the anniversary gathering, not from my parents, who remained silent, but from cousins, uncles, and family acquaintances who had been present. The messages carried the same tone: disbelief, sympathy, and quiet confirmation. "I can't believe they treated you like that. You were right to show everyone." Finally, the truth comes out. Word spread fast. My parents' reputation, which they had guarded so meticulously, was in shambles. Dad's colleagues who had attended the banquet stopped returning his calls. A business contact who had overheard the Chalet debacle quit a collaboration over ethics concerns. For a man who lived by appearances, it was like watching his carefully constructed empire disintegrate. Vanessa attempted damage control on social media, posting cryptic claims about jealous siblings and toxic family dynamics, but no one believed her. Screenshots of her original gloating post had already circulated across the family. Every attempt she made to portray herself as a victim only pushed her deeper. Friends she had worked so hard to impress unfollowed her. Her small circle of admirers shrank suddenly, and Mom retreated entirely. For years, she had been the peacemaker, smoothing over Dad's rants and Vanessa's entitlement. But after that night, no one was listening. "Let's just move on," comments fell flat. I remained quiet. I didn't have to brag. I didn't need to say anything. Silence, once my enemy, had become my most effective weapon. Weeks passed, and the distance grew. No more calls, no guilt trips, no letters nailed to my door. It was as if they recognized they had no leverage left over me. And the best part? I didn't miss them. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I had a job, friends, and a sense of independence I had never known. I had peace. Then, one afternoon in March, I met my aunt again at a cafe. She informed me that Dad had tried to throw a dinner to clear the air, but few people had turned up. The family was no longer interested in performing for his version of reality. "You don't realize it yet," she explained, smiling, "but you won, not just against them, but against the hold they had on you." That night, I stood by my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. For years, I had begged to sit at their table, bent myself to suit their shape, and carried the weight of their approval like a burden I couldn't bear. But I didn't need it anymore. I had created something stronger, something they couldn't change or take away. Their chalet vacation had failed. Their reputation had crumbled. Their grip on me was gone. I had reclaimed my life. I immersed myself fully into my career, finally enjoying the fruits of my effort. I worked on new projects, volunteered for responsibilities I had previously avoided, and saw recognition from supervisors who valued my contributions. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I invested in myself, both professionally and personally. My health improved, my confidence soared. Old friends I had drifted from returned to my life. I found joy in small victories, lunches with coworkers, weekend hikes, and quiet evenings in my apartment where I felt fully at peace. My apartment became my sanctuary, the place where I was entirely in control. Each evening, I would stand by the windows overlooking the city skyline, glass of wine in hand, and silently remind myself, this is mine, not theirs, mine. They continued to send messages, of course. Vanessa tried her usual guilt trips. "You're ruining everything. Why are you doing this to us?" Dad sent veiled threats about destroying bridges. Mom wrote as the martyr, "I lie awake at night worrying about you." But their words no longer had power. I didn't even respond. Silence remained my most effective tool. Deep inside, I knew something they could never take away had already been secured: my independence, my clarity, my freedom. Time passed, and with each day, my life strengthened outside their orbit. Julian connected me with new business contacts who opened doors I had never imagined. Contracts, larger clients, and more income than I had ever earned. I moved into a bigger apartment with panoramic windows, letting the city lights serve as my reminder of autonomy. I was no longer the overlooked, underappreciated daughter. I was powerful in ways they could never manipulate. By summer, I had fully rebuilt my world. The evidence of their deceit, carefully documented, was stored away, not for revenge anymore, but as a shield of assurance that I would never be undermined. I could choose whether to confront them again or simply continue living my life without their interference. The control I had sought my whole life now lay entirely in my hands. And in that silence, in that distance from their manipulation, I finally understood something profound. Family is not always defined by blood or tradition. True connection requires respect, gratitude, and care, qualities my parents and Vanessa had long withheld from me. I had stopped chasing validation I would never receive. Instead, I had found it within myself. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving Christmas, holidays, or family gatherings. I was thriving, free of expectation, free of manipulation, and free to create a life entirely of my own design. I was Emma, unshakable, self-reliant, and finally in control of my own story.